Hello, welcome to this week's Unfiltered Autistic podcast. In this week's podcast, I speak with Davida Hartman, a professor in the UCD School of Psychology, a chartered psychologist with the Psychological Society of Ireland, and an author. She's also the co founder and the clinical director at the Adult Autism and ADHD practice, a fully online service covering the UK and Ireland, which provides respectful neurodiversity, affirmative, autism, and ADHD identification supports. She's also the co founder and clinical director and principal psychologist at the Children's Clinic, with clinics currently available now in Dublin, Galway, Limerick, and Tipperary. So, Davida, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Amanda, for asking me. I am a long-time fan of yours and the podcast, and I really, really appreciate you asking me to come on and talk. Okay, me. So I am a psychologist. I said a chartered psychologist. I've been working with autistic children and families for a long, long, long time. Even, just when I finished college, even before I did my master's or got into any of my professional training, I would have been supporting autistic children in school, and then did my training, and then since then was working in what was Beach Park Services, supporting autistic children in Dublin, and then was working in Kilkenny for a service also that supported autistic kids. Now, when I say autistic, I mean obviously they were autistic and ADHD and a multitude of neurodivergence. Um, and then moved back to Dublin to set up the children's clinic with my colleague, Dr. Moira Kennedy. And then a few years later, well, during COVID, set up that I don't like to mention COVID. We like to pretend that that never happened. And I apologize to everyone for bringing up that word. Set up the adult autism and ADHD practice, which is a fully online practice. So could be run at the time during COVID, because at the time none of us were used to being online for any of those kind of things. Um, so and actually then, I mean, personally myself, recently I only realized that I was myself was ADHD in the last few years, even though having worked with neurodivergent families for many, many, many years, I didn't have a clue. It was only when my autistic and ADHD friends would have kept kind of saying to me, "Now, Davida, you know you're ADHD," and I was like, "Ah, you know." So I suppose what I'm saying to families and to parents is that even people literally surrounded by this every single day in their work and maybe home lives don't reckon it's very difficult to recognize it in yourself. And my family is multiply neurodivergent, so I have autistic and ADHD kids and dyspraxia. And honestly, most of my friends are neurodivergent. I realize we're all, it's like one person realizes you're neurodivergent, and suddenly everybody around you is as well. And I love that. I think that's brilliant. So, neurodivergent people are my favorite people. So that is a bit about myself. I'm feeling like I missed out on stuff. Okay, yes, sorry. So the last few years, what we've really been focusing on in the children's clinic and the adult autism practice is this neurodiversity affirmative approach to supporting autistic children and adults, and also specifically around assessing. Now we like to use the word identification and not, diagnosis, or even we try not to even say assessment, but the problem is that people don't know what we're talking about if we use identification or the identification process, and we don't use assessment and diagnosis. But we're, as part of this neurodiversity affirmative movement, which is much broader than myself and certainly not anything that I invented at all. It was, my autistic and otherwise neurodivergent colleagues that would have introduced me to it. Tara O'Donnell Killen actually was the who I work very
Oh,
closely with. She
fantastic.
runs Thriving Autistic.
I was just about to say, yeah, Thrive. I love the work they're doing. God, it's
Oh,
more than yourselves, reading your affirmative space.
oh, absolutely amazing. Tara is amazing. Thriving Autistic are amazing. So when I wanted to, I had the idea for the adult autism and ADHD practice. And I thought, well, obviously I'm not autistic myself. I can't do this without autistic involvement. So I partnered with Tara, and they provide
Amazing.
the post identification support sessions and the follow on support for adults through that process. So that's the last few years, because for years with the children's clinic. So when we set up the children's clinic, initially we were in Dublin, and myself and Moira really wanted to open a space that was really kind, strengths based, where parents could come and there wasn't this kind of tragedy narrative, and where
Yeah.
parents would be listened to and would get a really, really high quality private assessment. Identification is what we call it, identification process.
Yeah.
I'll probably use assessment for this
Yeah.
podcast
Just so
so
people, because
people
I
will
know many
just so
parents
people
starting out
will
might be
understand.
familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we really wanted that, and we really achieved that. And then, but and in the and we so re, and recently we've opened up clinics in. We've been so delighted. Recently, this year, we've opened up clinics, or actually in the last couple of years, in Galway, Limerick, and Tipperary. And it's our plan to actually open up clinics in lots of other counties, because we know
Where are you based in Galway?
Lisbon
Oh,
Industrial
Lisbon.
Estate. Yeah,
That's not
Lisbon.
far. I'm based here in Mayo. So gosh, that's great for families here in the West to be able to access that, like in-person support for their family. And is it just assessments that you provide in
Yeah,
Galway, or
at the
could you?
moment in Galway, yeah,
Okay.
it's just assessments.
Okay.
It's very possible that in the future we'll be providing other stuff, but at the moment it's just assessments. And we picked that. We talked to lots of people in Galway, and we've heard about the traffic issues, and
Yeah,
we
it's a bit
picked that on
tricky.
purpose, that it would be handy for people, for lots of people. Um, so yes, that's where we're based in Galway, and we're really hoping, because we know that there's such a need
Oh,
for
it's massive. Especially here in the
for
West, I can't think of too many really. There might be one or two, but I can't really think. And again, because you're so neuroaffirmative, and that you've been, in my view anyway, as a parent and as a professional, I would actually say the children's clinic, and yourself in particular, and Tara and Moira and all of your colleagues, you've been kind of leading the way. But long before, and I don't want to say it's popular now to be neurodiversity affirming, but before people really understood what that even meant, you were
yes.
doing that work for many, many years. You really have been, like, you're living what you're saying. Like you've been doing it for years and years and years.
Yeah, yeah. We in fairness, we have. Yeah,
You
we
have,
have.
yeah.
And that's not to say that there isn't loads of people doing great work. Also,
Of course, sorry, yeah.
but there certainly isn't enough to meet the demand, because,
No.
the rates, even in terms of the latest autism rates in America, was it 1 in 33? But then
Yeah, I think so.
even I mean, I actually think that's an underestimation, because the rates are still saying that it's 4 times more likely to be identified in boys than girls. And anybody that's anybody who is in
Knows.
this community knows that that's absolute rubbish, that it's almost definitely 50-50. So you can assume that all those girls aren't being identified. So personally, I would think the rates are closer to 1 in 10. I think that it's a huge issue, and it's one of the things that it was actually one of our huge aims with the children's clinic as well, because we had seen that so much with girls, and we really specialized in that area, because before, at the
Amazing.
time, there was so much bad practice. People were using the ADOS, and then if a child didn't meet the criteria
Mm,
on the ADOS, despite all this information from the parents, there was this idea that, oh, well, we can't, now we don't use the give the diagnosis. We don't use diagnosis. We don't say give the diagnosis. It's just supporting parents to figure out whether their child is autistic in a collaborative way. But a lot of psychologists weren't doing that, but actually, not even their fault, really. It was poor training, that
yeah.
we were told you have to, or people thought you have to meet the criteria on that ADOS, and if you don't, that means we can't possibly say that you're autistic. And then also there was this lack of understanding that, of course, look, loads of the boys were as well, but loads of the girls will come in, and of course they're going to make great eye contact, they're going to chat, they're going to
Masking.
there's so much masking going on. And then also, on top of masking as well, I think our ideas of what it means to be autistic has changed so much.
Yes.
When you meet a child for 1 hour, and I think as well there was there was a kind of culture. I would have felt that there was in the past. I think it's less so, a lot less so now, but a long time ago, I think there was a lot of culture around distrust of parents' information versus the
Parent
information they
blame,
saw.
nearly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we're big on, in the children's clinic, we are very, very strong on the parent is the expert in their child. We trust the information that the parent is bringing us. Um, that's the same in
And
the adult autism and ADHD
I
practice. We
suppose in that
trust
regard,
the
then, say if
therapist.
I was like a parent today,
Yeah,
and well, I suppose I am a parent, but if I was a parent starting out all over again, and I was considering, gosh, I've seen great information online, I've seen your website, I'm thinking, I'll say my gorgeous Max, 'cause he's 7, could my gorgeous Max, if I didn't know he was autistic, if I was considering perhaps he might be autistic, but I'm not ready yet to go forward, maybe financially, or even just for whatever reason, not ready to go for that assessment. Maybe I just haven't decided I want to go for the assessment. Is there anything that I can do, say, as a parent right now, if it's the parent listening to the podcast, say they're thinking about, I want to go to, say, the children's clinic in Galway or
yeah.
Dublin or Tipperary or wherever else in the country, Limerick. But I'm not ready to go yet. It's something I could be doing, say, to gather information or to note take, because sometimes I would have found even myself when I went for those assessments when my children were smaller, I got too nervous during the assessments, and then afterwards I'm like, gosh, I wish I was able to explain that, or because it's very emotive as well. Because not
Yes.
because you think your child is autistic, it's more because for me it was always about how will other people treat my children, because we know unfortunately that sometimes when a
Yes.
person is seen as being different or is obviously very different, that sometimes
Mhm.
people that don't understand or accept difference sometimes aren't so kind. So I often
Yes.
found myself going, I wish, is there something that you would recommend, say, to families that are coming to the children's clinic that they could be
Yeah.
doing ahead of time?
Sure. Well, I think one of the things, in case I forget, is we really recognize that the assessment process. And look, I've been through it myself with my own children, and it was stressful for me, even though it was with in my own
Hmm.
clinic with my gorgeous staff who I knew were going to treat my children so well. But it's a very emotional, having been on both sides now, it's a really emotional process. And even from me coming into it with a very
Professional.
positive view of what it is to be. I mean, as I said, most of my friends are autistic, neurodivergent, so it's not even that I see it as a negative, but it's a very difficult process. But we also recognize that a lot of parents themselves are neurodivergent, and
Yes.
you have to respect communication preferences, and bringing someone into a room and asking them lots of questions about their child is a very stressful time to be giving that information. So we actually send a very detailed, now parents don't have to if that doesn't suit their communication preference, but we send them very detailed interview before, and they can
Amazing.
actually fill in the information in written format before getting to us. And if they've given it to it in written format, they don't have to tell us again verbally in that session, and they can also email it to us. So there isn't that huge pressure in that moment of I have to give you all this information now. So that's one of the things that we do to try. But I think for parents who are considering it, what I always recommend is reading, listening to blogs, going on social media with actually autistic people and listening to their experiences. Like there's great, like recently there's a really great book, anthology of Irish autistic voices by Neil
Oh,
Garvey.
Neve Garv, yeah, fantastic. I read
Yeah,
some of it. It's fantastic.
absolutely fantastic. And there's loads of books about, so there's so many great books now written by autistic. Like if your child is a girl, for example, that is Sienna Castellone, how to, oh, is it like Autistic Survival Guide for Girls or
Guide for
something?
Girls. I probably have it. I'm just like, where are all my girl focused books? They're actually over there on that shelf
Yeah.
there. Yeah. And there's
So
some by Eve
books,
Baduli now, the general kind of autistic
oh,
experience. Yeah,
I
for
love
younger kids. Yeah.
my God, I love
Yeah,
it so
she's
much.
class.
There's actually brilliant. It's funny. At the moment, there's better resources in terms of books for girls than boys, because
There
there's all
is,
these
yeah.
great autistic women who are writing all these books for girls. So I suppose but my shift in how I worked came when I started listening to autistic people talking about their experience. So it wasn't from any professional training. It wasn't from any course I did. It wasn't from any professional book or even research, because the research only now is catching up. The research is very, very behind
Yeah.
in terms of actual autistic experience. Now there's lots of great research now that's coming out from autistic professionals. But anyway, my point is, my turning point when I really started to understand autistic experience was when I actually, because once you read story, you start to see the commonalities, don't you?
There's a thread there.
There's a thread. There's so many differences, but there's a thread of commonality between all of those. And I think that if parents really take the time to listen to autistic voices, they're going to recognize things about themselves. Because if your child is autistic, you're almost out, one of the parents is at least is autistic. And I think that's also something that's very misunderstood, that we didn't used to really think about it that way. But in my
No.
experience, in my professional experience, you know,
Mhm.
I can't think of a single child where neither of the parents were
That,
near. And the thing
yeah.
is, see, this is the thing for parents. So I think what we would see in the children's clinic a lot is that parents, they think that to be autistic, there has to be issues. Okay. So there has to be
Yes.
concerns, right? But a lot of the time, because the parent is themselves autistic, what they're coming in is they're saying, no, no, well, I don't actually, I'm bringing them because this is not all the time now. This is a common thread.
Sometimes.
Because somebody has said maybe they're autistic, but I think everything's normal. That's normal. That's normal. That's normal. Okay. And now, what is normal? I hate that word. So, but I'm not
Mm.
saying those things aren't normal. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that those things are autistic experience. And yes, you think oh, I really don't want to use that thing normal, because then I don't want to think that I'm saying it's
But it's the parents' way of being naturally as
it's a
well, because
natural
that's
way
what
of being.
the way.
And
So they're like,
we're
but
kind
sure,
of saying,
everyone
yeah,
does that.
it is well, it is normal for autistic people. Yes, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I think for parents, a huge part before they come to the assessment is trying to work on, which is very hard, because I know as a parent, all you want is for your child to be happy and have a happy life. And they're, like you said, the fear isn't that they're autistic, but the fear is how people are
The
going to treat
external factors.
the external factors. But this world is, it's a changing world. I know I live in a little neuroaffirmative bubble, and I'm sometimes
Same.
shocked by attitudes of people that I meet that's outside that neuroaffirmative bubble, but things are changing. And even like you said, the growth in neurodiversity, you know, information about neurodiversity now, whether people have a real understanding is not there yet, but we're working on it. Anyway, okay, so
But
my
I
point,
definitely have seen a difference from like 15 years ago when Connor was
oh,
starting
for
out to now. Like
sure.
it's a different world. It's
I would say I think that particularly the autistic community has done a really, really good job of being
incredible.
very loud about this in a very good way, you know? So so there has been positive changes for sure. And now there needs to be just more, outside what I think needs next. Sorry, I know I'm skipping all over the place, but I think what's really
No,
needed
but I
now
know what you're
is
going to say. I agree already.
outside the community, people who don't have a clue need to. I mean, I think that
Yeah.
neurodiversity needs to be taught at a very base level across schools,
All of
across
school.
everywhere.
And
I completely agree. It needs to be part of the core curriculum in for every teacher training, and it needs to be part of the core curriculum for the children as well. So yeah, I'm with you on that. But yeah, so parents preparing, I think it's around, I really do think it's around listening to autistic voices. And because then you'll see, when you're reading those stories, you'll see, oh, actually my child does that. Oh, actually, yeah. And that's really helpful, because then you can come to the assessment process say with a better understanding of what might be autistic experience and what might not. And I think as well, it's like going back to that thing of mistrust, or that there's a perception that the assessment is going to be maybe a battle. But I mean, with the children's clinic, we another huge aspect of us is that it's supposed to be it's collaborative with the parents. We are working with this. We're here to help you. You
yeah,
are our client. Your child is our client. We're here to help you figure this out. So it's not, you can tell us, I don't understand this. I don't know about this. I think this, we're there to help, rather than it be you know,
I'm the expert in the room,
questionable.
and yeah. It's the
Sorry,
triple
Gareth,
empathy
repeat
theory that
that.
Dr. Mary Doherty talks about, isn't it? It's taken away those layers of, I suppose it's also cultural, I suppose,
Yes,
discourse as well. When you look at like the two different perspectives of what's really occurring in the room.
exactly. And I think the thing is, it's very understandable, because people have been to the GP, they've probably been to lots and lots of different professionals beforehand, where the experience was people aren't really listening. Oh, sure, it's
No,
happened to me myself with my own children, in with GPs, or you know, people outside our own, uh my own kind of bubble of
sphere, I suppose.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. But I think that can really help. And then if they want to take notes themselves, take notes themselves of things they have, notes of questions that they might have,
good
things
idea.
that they
Yeah.
might think, the reasons why they think the child might be autistic or not, because all of that stuff is really, really helpful for us as well.
And say if it's a parent then of, because I'm just thinking of, say, parents that might have contacted me over time. If you're then the parent of an older child and you think your child could be autistic and you want your
Mhm.
child to go for that assessment because you want them, or sorry, identification or assessment,
Yeah.
depending on the language they use, if you want them to go forward for that because it's going to be really life affirming for them, but they
Hmm.
might be, maybe they're a little bit older and for whatever reason, they're like, no, 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 I'm not, I don't want to go. But you, the parent, knows that down the road, this will be, if when they get, maybe when they're a little bit older, they'll be able to understand what this all means. what happens then if there's a tricky scenario like that? The parent can, in their own mind, clearly see that I believe my child is autistic, but my child, maybe for whatever reason, they want to not be identified, or they don't want to believe that they are for whatever reason. Maybe they
I
haven't had that
know.
opportunity to explore autism positively. Is
Yeah.
Does that scenario, say, ever come across your desk at the children's clinic,
It,
or if it
yeah,
does, what's the advice?
Yeah, it does. It does, and it's for usually it's with the older children. So I really recommend getting in there early as possible, because once you hit the teenage years, now there's loads of teens that are coming in. We're seeing more and more teens that are coming in, and the parents are actually saying, "My teen thinks they're autistic, and I don't really know much about this, but they're saying that they are, so we're bringing them along." And
It's
that
not
is,
amazing they self-identified, like, for the teenagers,
yes,
like how affirming.
it's so affirming because people are talking about it. Their friends are neurodivergent. There is a whole community of people who, younger generation, where actually it's very normalized. And I'm
And they
not saying
talk really
all.
positively about it, because even Haley's friends would have said to her, like, before she kind of said in school that she was autistic, she just wasn't ready. And they would say, they have this thing that Haley's group of friends will say, they say, I think you have a touch of the tism, which I think
Yeah,
is, they say it jokingly, like, they're like, I think you have a touch of the tism. And then she was like,
yeah.
I am in fact autistic. And like, a lot of even her very close friends are neurodivergent, whether
Yes.
autistic, ADHD, or whatever else. So all of her friends, as it turns out, have ended up being, it wasn't that
Yeah.
she handpicked them. They just, it's like we all like realize,
Oh,
we recognize each other in different ways, and we just kind of, we find our own people eventually, if that makes sense. Did you find
oh,
that?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, it's one of the questions that we ask, because sometimes, because
Mm.
there's this misunderstanding about autistic people that they're not sociable, or they don't want a
Yeah,
friend, or they
crazy stuff.
don't have
Yeah.
lots of friends. And so some of the things is, oh no, my child has loads of friends. And we're like, great, yeah. I mean, that's part of autistic experience. And do you think those friends are neurodivergent? Oh yeah, they're all neurodivergent. But so actually for us, that's a sign, because we're looking for signs that it fits. The language we use is, we're looking for kind of evidence and signs that the child's experience fits autistic experience, and having loads of
Interesting.
neurodivergent
Yeah.
friends is part of autistic experience. Like, it would be unusual. I'm not, this is not coming from a research study. I'm just saying this is from my own experience. But for
Anecdotal.
me, it would be unusual to be a neurotypical child in a big group of only neurodivergent friends. It's not really.
It's too much pressure, I would say, to try and, in the nicest possible way, hang around with people that aren't autistic all of the time. And I mean this really positively, but because it's not your, not, it's not natural, but it's not your unique or authentic way of being all of the time. And it's extra social pressure trying to, that's what I'm just thinking for myself. Like, I've loads of friends that are autistic and not autistic, and
Me
non
too.
neurodivergent as well. And I just feel like I'm trying extra hard, and then I'm always saying, I'm sorry, is that what you mentioned? Whereas autistic people, I find, because we both have had those grown up lived experiences of confusion and whatever, they might say,
Mhm.
oh no, that's what I meant, just in case. And I'm like, oh yeah, sorry, I got that straight away there. Do you know the kind of way?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the thing of people finding each other is extraordinary. I mean, I see it in my clinical work, and I see it in my own life all the time. I think it's really interesting, and I think it's really cool, because
Yeah.
it is.
So
Well,
for
yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, I don't mean to talk over you. This may be pure neurodivergent. Do you feel then, so if that was a parent saying, I wonder, could my child be autistic? If they happen to notice that perhaps the friendships that they do have, they might be kind of very individual, very unique individuals, that might stand out to them, that perhaps, not that we're diagnosing friends as being, neurodivergent, but
Yeah, yeah,
that it
yeah.
might stand out that they may not be, they might be more similar to their child than dissimilar to other people, if that makes sense.
So in my experience, it is the case that if a child has
Yeah.
has neurodivergent friends, usually they're neurodivergent themselves, because they obviously like being around those people, the community, whatever's happening in terms of the play and in terms of the communication. They're enjoying each other's company, they're enjoying each other's communication, and um, yeah, yeah. In my experience, yes,
So then for the child, then, that the parent can see all the friends, say, potentially neurodivergent, and they're
yeah,
showing, say, the parent in their own unique ways, that they're showing a lot of autistic, authentic ways of being to the parent.
yes.
And the parent thinks, child would say, Amanda's autistic. I think, I want to, and maybe I'm saying, no, I'm not
Oh yeah,
autistic. And for whatever reason, then how do
yes,
I, as a
yes,
parent,
yes.
is
Sorry,
there a way to approach that? No, that's
yes,
me.
sorry,
I went
let's
off.
just get back to
That's
that.
the
I'm,
ADHD
I'm
brain
moving
in
on to
me.
that. Okay, so what
That's
I
totally
would
me.
say is, it is very difficult, because teenagers, if they've really they've gotten to the stage where they are like absolute no, and they're an older teenager, you don't want to go through a process where they're coming up, because
No,
it's supposed to be a collaborative, because we also very much listen to the child voice. We send out, we very, very strongly recommend that the child knows what we don't, it used to be people would come and look, sometimes it can happen, and sometimes there's exception, not with older, never with older teenagers, because there's so many stories of, I mean, I would really recommend to parents, don't bring any older child. I mean, I don't think you should bring any child to an assessment process without them knowing what it's for. But
of course, yeah.
older children, it's an absolute disaster for the future, because what do you do at the end if the child is autistic and you're telling them, what a lot of people have said is that they feel like that was a real breach of trust, that they were brought to this assessment
Because it
process.
is.
They didn't even know, because it is, they didn't even know what it was. And then nothing, they're not going to take on that information in a positive way anyway. So we really listen to the voice of the autistic person, and we look for their experiences as well. And for older children who are able to talk about it, we actually talk to them, what do you think? Do you think you're autistic? What do you think about, is this something that this is kind of typical autistic experience? Do you identify, if they have the language skills, obviously, we adapt it depending on if they have an additional intellectual disability or things like that. So the ideally, you want the child coming in who is really part of this process. We're going to figure this out together. And then, because that leads to the best outcomes in terms of the child then taking that on board, because they really feel like they've been listened to and they were part of this process. So it's not an easy, you can come to the children's clinic for a consultation as well. You don't have to go, sorry, we also do consultations, which you can, so if you have a teenager that's really extremely negative and refusing to do it, you can come for a consultation to talk about it. But I think one of the things that I would recommend is trying, now it's very hard to get teenagers to do anything that you want them to as a
They like to
parent.
do their own thing.
Yeah, exactly. But what I would say is there are very positive, there is on social media, there is a lot of what I would say good content that's a bit less serious, is a bit more funny, is a bit dark, like depending on your child and knowing your child, and there's like, for example, if they're a girl, there's way more stuff for girls, but Chloe Hayden, for example, is an Australian actress who has really great social media presence and is really openly autistic and talks about it a lot, and so there's a lot of people like that. So what I would say is, if you can find social media, if they're an older teenager, like the Daily Tism. I don't know if it's a,
Yeah, I've heard that. But it's shown them another view on autism. So it's not just the book says you're autistic or something, say like in a non-negative way, but a book that's like, these are the traits. And they're like, that's not me. But when they see the real person living their
the
real
real
life.
person, yeah. And also they see the real person, and also, so for example, even like there's the NAS in England, they have ambassadors, and there's
Yes.
a guy, oh, I can't remember his name, but anyway, he's one of the ambassadors for the NAS, and he's in his mid-20s, he's got tattoos, he's got a shaved head, he looks really cool, he is cool.
He looks like
So
people that those kids or teens might know.
exactly, exactly. So it's like, oh, and he has a girlfriend. You can see him going out to clubs, and then also a lot of the content. So a lot of the less serious content. So there's people making jokes about being autistic. There's jokes about being ADHD. There's kind of an in-group that. So it's showing them it actually, you can actually
Showing
be
them
part
autistic
of a
culture.
community. Exactly. There's a community here for you that actually is pretty cool and is a lot of fun, and you're going to be accepted, and it's actually going to be positive for you, and it just takes away that serious nature of being autistic.
So for parents, I suppose a good idea would be, if you have a, say, a teen or an older child that's maybe a bit resistant, maybe research and look out for individuals that you feel they might be able to see as a positive, not maybe not a role model,
Yeah,
but some that might positively represent what it is to be autistic. And there's great, you just named a few, that's great examples of
yeah.
people online
Or
and through
Eminem. I
different
mean,
things.
I don't know how many teenagers now
Yeah.
listen to Eminem, but there's a lot more people who are talking about
Yeah.
being
But
autistic.
even
Like if
through
they're
the
really into
umbrella of like
sports.
neurodiversity, you can even
Yeah.
like name this, how many people like ADHD you could identify immediately that they're also like, if they find the term autistic tricky to begin with,
Yes.
broaden it out. And do you feel that's helpful? Like broaden it out to neurodivergent, like look at all these
Absolutely.
incredible,
Exactly. I mean, all my references are a bit old for teenagers, but even Jamie Oliver now is
showing your
speaking.
age there, Davida.
I know, I know. Oh, I'm like
Mine
Eminem,
as well.
Jamie Oliver. Oh my God. But and there's more sports stars. There's more
Yeah.
footballers. So find whatever they're interested in, and talk to them about that. But I think also I'll tell you what a recommendation is that to start bringing neurodivergence into just typical daily conversation, not in a pressured way, like we're going to sit down and talk about this,
Here's
but
the
just
neurodiversity time. It's just naturally into
just
conversation.
naturally, yeah, naturally come up in conversation. And you see, to be able to do that, you have to have read the stuff yourself. And that's why I say to read the own accounts from various people, because to be able to have that natural language, to be able to bring it into conversation, because people often say, well, I don't know what are the things I'm going to, how do I bring that into conversation? Because it's easier for me because obviously I live in this world, and it's easier for me if I'm watching something on TV to kind of say, oh, like in a positive way, that's so, in a, if something good happens, like, oh, that's so autistic, did you see the way that detective saw all those things? And so I'm saying that's so autistic, but I'm not saying it in a negative way, I'm saying it in a
Positive.
positive way, so they're hearing kind of positive messaging about, and then you're not just doing autistic, you're also doing ADHD or whatever. But
So maybe that brings us into like another question then, Davida, then. So say if you, so we'll say for the child, a younger child, they mightn't yet really so say the child fully knows that they're to be assessed and they've done everything they can to inform the child, but the child is still a little bit young and maybe won't really understand what any of this means just yet. But
yeah.
say the parents like, I need to, maybe the child came into you, say, actually, what is the youngest age a child can come to you? I suppose that is a question as well.
Oh, like
What's the
we've
youngest?
actually had 1.5-year-olds, yeah.
Wow.
Usually with those children, there's very early obvious signs, like the child is flapping, for example, or
Yeah. Yeah, my son
they're
Connor was diagnosed before he was one, but that was like 15 years ago. But he had a significant other co-occurring kind of, I suppose, needs and differences as well. So that came along with that diagnosis as well, or
yeah.
identification.
Yes, yes. I mean, we say 0 to 18 on the Children's Clinic website.
Wow.
Most of the kids coming into us are around 8 or 9, I think, is probably the average age. But then we have loads of older teenagers and some toddlers as well. But usually, like I said, they're showing the more obvious.
Okay, so
Yeah,
say I came into you with, say,
yeah,
my gorgeous Max when he was much younger and I didn't have any
yeah,
knowledge base in autism, and I was saying, okay, this is great. I tried to explain to him that we're going for an assessment, but he's only 3, so I don't really know
yeah, yeah,
what
yeah.
he's grasping this. And maybe for whatever reason, I just
He's
happened.
very young, to be
Yeah.
fair.
And maybe I just haven't brought it up in conversation for a number of years, for whatever
Uh-huh.
the reason. Maybe not intentionally, just happened. But now he's 8, 9, and he's noticing that he's different. Maybe he's flapping. Maybe socially he's aware that he's a little bit different. Whatever it is, now he's figuring out that he's different. But I've never said it to him before now. And now maybe he has seen children in his class or wherever that might have, say, significant support needs that are also autistic, like my son Connor.
Mhm.
Like Jack and Max would be vastly different to their eldest brother. So say
Yes,
now Max is 8 and his view of autism might be Connor, which is a very particular, or
yes.
myself as an older woman. And he's like, I'm not autistic. But I'm like, yes, but at 3, I brought you to Davida, you were identified. I've always supported you to be yourself and never occurred to me to tell you, but now I need to tell you. And then how do parents, if they're saying, I need to say to my child, you are autistic, and I just don't know. So that's one good point. So this is a younger child now. So great idea is to show the people that represent autistic culture
Yes.
really positively. But if it's a younger child, the parent's not really sure what might be,
Yeah,
say,
yeah,
so
yeah. Well, I
strategies to
actually,
support.
it's so funny. I literally have forgotten that I've actually written a book about this. It's slightly outdated in terms of
Is it the FAQs book?
FAQs.
You've
Yeah,
Yeah, I have it
talking
here on
to
the shelf. Yeah.
talking to your child about their diagnosis. I wouldn't use diagnosis now, and I'm absolutely positive. I'm a bit scared because language has changed so
Yeah,
rapidly
but
in
I
the last
think people
few
know
years.
that though too. If they're reading the book, they'll understand. But I actually have that book. A friend lent it to me, and then I never gave it back because I thought it was brilliant. So I
Oh,
actually told
thank
her I'd buy
you.
her one. I don't think I ever actually have it. I've got so many of your books here. You've written so many incredible ones. So do you feel like a book like that might be helpful,
Yeah,
or
well,
what
I
do you
mean,
think?
I don't want to plug my own book. I can basically tell you now, because essentially what it boils down to is all the things that I'm talking about now. Is that I
Yeah.
think that, it's a slow. Ideally, if you before you do, don't make it one big sit down talk, like, because they're going to think this is this big serious thing. But again, do all that learning yourself so that you feel comfortable, so that when you talk about it, you're not feeling anxious and you're not portraying that it's a negative thing, because it takes a while to get to that point. And so do your own learning first, get comfortable with it yourself, and then start talking about it at home, like I said, in a very normal way. And then there are great books out there. I'm just trying to think again, all the girl ones I can think of for that age group are girls. Like there's a Rosie book. I'm trying to think of the
The
ones for
Life
the
of Rosie,
anyway,
is it? It's
Life
it's
of
a
Rosie.
Navy book with a yeah,
Yeah.
there's a girl with kind of cartoony with yeah, I have it as well. I have a lot of
Um
there's a great
it's
book by
yeah.
Reframing Autism. It's can't think of the name of it now either. I have it probably behind me. It's something. It's okay to be or something. I can't think of the name. Maybe I'll put maybe a list of like
Yes.
recommended books onto this
Yeah.
podcast. But there's one by Reframing Autism, the first edition of it I always recommend. And there's another one, something Remy as well, by Reframing Autism, really positive as well. That's
Yeah,
an
they do.
Australian organization.
Yes, who do great stuff. I think that's it. I think the books are absolutely brilliant, but you just need to be careful yourself. Those ones are good, but some of the books are very outdated now, like, the All Cats Have Asperger's and things like that. Some of those books that were big at the time and were
Or The
great.
Dog in the Night. Sometimes people
Dog,
recommend
yeah,
that, and it's not a great one, really, being honest.
no, there's
I
there's
think, I
very
think someone
it's
gave me a
very
copy of that
outdated.
years ago. And it's still left unread on a shelf because I think I read it many, many years ago, but it's not really
Yeah.
one you'd read now.
No, 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 no. And the thing is, look, oh my God, listen, my first book has autism spectrum disorder all over. I see it sometimes. I'm like, oh, I'm working with the publisher on doing new second editions. Anyway, okay, I'm going to get back to your point. So an 8-year-old. So I think the thing is, it's not one big talk. It's about bringing in neurodiversity in gentle ways, in normal conversation, talking about people who are neurodivergent, and then talking about, if you can see things in yourself that are or the kid's dad that are similar to the kid, you can use that as a way. Oh, do you know the way I love, or do you know the way I love sitting down for hours and crocheting, and like I get a bit cranky when someone comes in and when I'm doing my crocheting, because I love doing my crocheting. And do you know the way you love uh playing Xbox for hours? Like we have that in common, don't we? And then that can be, and you can talk about those kind of things, and then you can slowly build up to, do you know, like lots of autistic people have that they're really great at concentrating at things for a long time. So you can bring, so there'll be loads of those kind of things, so that the child doesn't feel isolated. Like, you're not saying you not have, we don't use have, but you're not you're not trying to play, you have this thing alone in this family, because there's no way that child is alone in that family with their neurodivergence.
Hmm.
So bring it into, this is just part of our family, and your granddad and this, and what I would say is, you can start with the strengths for sure, but don't stick only to the strengths, because it's kind of like that outdated autism is my
Superhero,
superpower.
superpower. Yeah.
I'm allergic to it.
just
you know
just be real. We all have differences and things we find tricky, and just give the language, but give them a positive way to understand that it's okay and that you can work with your strengths to support yourself. Do you think would that be useful?
Exactly, exactly, exactly. That it's all no, and you can throw in things like, if they hate small talk, like, oh, neurotypicals love small talk, don't they? We hate, but not that you're trying to do an us and them. I would hate to say, but it's part
There's
of a
actually a good
broader
book on that, a funny
conversation.
one. There's
What?
one called, I think there's a book called Johnny Doesn't Flap or something.
Yes, Johnny doesn't
It's like a
slap.
play on, yeah, there's like a play on, what, in a non-negative way, but like just pointing out the differences that
Yeah.
non-autistic people have, and not
Well,
making it like a bad thing.
no, exactly. And you know what? It's funny, because I actually got a bit of feedback once from a talk that I did, and I needed to take it on board, and I haven't even done it here. But that sometimes what I don't want is to have this kind of, oh, neurodivergence is the best way, and to be neurotypical. Do you know, like we don't want to veer into that. The
No.
way that the world is going, and that we want it to go, is there are
Yeah.
different brains. Different brains have different strengths and different challenges, every single brain.
a-
And
and all okay.
and that neurotypical people have strengths and challenges, autistic people have strengths and challenges, we all do. And we need to figure out ways to, communicate with each other, and respect each other, and all of those kind of things. So I'll take back that neurotypical, but just sometimes for a child, in particular for a child that's maybe been bullied a lot for things, or been excluded for things, or is wondering themselves, why can't I mean, I've often thought that, why did I find that social chit chat so unbearable? What's wrong with me that I could, other people seem to, I mean, I can do it. Like, it's not like I can't do it. As you can tell, I can talk a lot. But if it's a topic that's boring to me, I find it really difficult. So it's actually very helpful for that child to realize, oh, you know what? Yeah, neurotypical people do actually enjoy that, and that's easier for them. But that's okay, because loads of, ways that you communicate, they find difficult, those kind of things.
Yeah, that's
Um,
really, so it's kind of helping them see it really positively from both perspectives, like double empathy theory.
yes, exactly, the double empathy theory, exactly, exactly, which was a huge part. Sorry, the double empathy theory and reading autistic experiences were my two shift in my thinking around neurodivergence. Yeah.
I suppose moving on then from that question, because I'm just watching your time, I think I've
Yeah.
taken up nearly an hour of your time. So I suppose if we're thinking then, so you've now you're thinking about the process. If you're gone to the assessment, you are now your child understands they're autistic. What about the wider family? Say, you have incredible grandparents and aunties and uncles, maybe friends, maybe cousins. Maybe they're like, sure, Amanda couldn't be autistic. Sure, we're all a bit autistic. Sure now. So if there's families and again, when these things are said, they're not ever that I've ever experienced meant with negativity. It's just
No, yeah,
people sometimes mean well, but when they're saying those things, I find often is that they don't want the child to experience difficulties broadly in society, because not everyone in
yes,
society unfortunately is accepting. But say
yeah,
if you're saying Amanda's autistic and Granny's like, she's not, sure, sure she was always like that, sure you were like that as a child. Like,
yeah,
how do you help a parent say that, saying, well, God, how am I going to say it to the family, because I already know they'll say no, they're not, sure, X, Y, and Z.
I
Would you
know.
have advice for those family members listening that are like, how do I
Yeah,
navigate that?
yeah, look, it's a difficult one because I think, like you said, people think they think it comes from a kind place, but what it's saying is they're seeing it as a negative thing. That's what always kind of gets me, because of course now it happens to me, and I'm
Yeah.
my emotional reaction is, oh, by you saying that, you're saying that thing is a negative thing, but I'm not saying it's a negative thing. But like you said, people are not doing it out of badness at all. It's just we're so culturally ingrained. You see, the thing is, it takes such a long time. It's not like for parents. I mean, I think that you can be easy on yourself and also easy on your family members, because I know that it can be extremely annoying when they don't listen. But we have entire lifetimes of messaging around being disabled and around being autistic that we are even unconsciously aware of. And to make that shift to thinking in a neuroaffirmative way takes a long time. It's not one book or one talk or one podcast or one training course or anything like that. It really takes a long time to shift. And even sometimes, within my own professional teams, we'll be in a team meeting and I'll say something or someone will say something and then we'll go, oh God, that's not neuroaffirmative at all. Okay, how do I'm so it's a difficult one to navigate. But what I would think is that once the parent is educated themselves, they can come at it, I think, from a calm, kind of educating way that, they could even get ahead of it. But I think it's about managing our own feelings around it, because our natural reaction is going to be that we're going to get angry with the family members. But it's about educating, providing them with, you know what? I'm going to give you this. I completely understand why you're coming from that perspective, because we didn't know this before and I didn't know this before. But I would really appreciate it if you didn't say that to me. It depends on the family
It's
member.
like every family is really individual. So find the safe language that that family member can receive, but that you can give your
Yes.
message to them so they can take it on board.
Yes, and I think what I think one thing that you can draw a hard line around is if they're speaking in front of your child in certain ways.
Mm.
So, you can't, I think it's good to be understanding, to provide them with say to them, here's a great book, here's a great blog. That's, listen to this podcast, listen to, Stephanie Preisner, for example, someone that
Fantastic.
that the family might know already and not know that
Recognize and
they're
know.
autistic. Exactly. But I think it's okay to draw a hard line with what they say around your kids, and you can say, well, look, I respect that whatever part of the journey that you're on in terms of your understanding about this, but in
But I
front of
need you
my
to do
children,
this.
this is the language that we use, and it's okay to do that, because it is important that their children are, and I think that sometimes actually families really listen to that, because they go, oh, okay, that they're really,
And if,
that's just
and this is
serious.
a question that has come into me, and I suppose I know the answer that I would give, but I want to see what your perspective is. So say then you've done all the work, you've done everything you can to help, say maybe it might be not the immediate family, but say maybe it could be aunties, uncles, cousins. I'm not trying to shame anybody that is an auntie, uncle, cousin, but say some other, not somebody in your daily life that you're seeing, but say you've done all the work, you've done all the advocacy, but they're still talking negatively. Is there, like, what my natural instinct would be then just to pull my child out of those scenarios where they're not directly
Yeah,
involved? If that was me, that's what I would do. But would you
yeah,
think, if now again, I'm not a chartered clinical psychologist like yourself,
yeah,
if I was a family coming to you saying, look, Davida, this is still happening, I don't know what to do, is there something that I
yeah,
can do that's affirming to me but also safe for my child, but also that I know I've done the right thing, whatever the right thing is
yeah.
in that scenario?
Well, I think that it's about putting boundaries in place. So you can, like I said, you can put very clear boundaries around, I understand that this is the way I would like you to speak. Either don't speak, you don't have to talk about it at all is one option.
Yeah.
We can talk about other topics besides this, and you can just not bring it up. We can just talk about whatever's on the TV or what, other topics. But if we're going to talk about neurodivergence, this is the language that I want used. And, you know, if that language isn't used, I'm not going to be able to, if you're going to continue to use that language around my child, I'm not going to be able to bring them up. But I want to. I'm not kind of advocating that you don't, the children shouldn't
That
be
I'm so
see
autistic,
their
but I'll be like,
families.
well, we just won't be here anymore. Yeah, which obviously is always there.
Because you have to protect your children. And it's like,
Yeah, of
but
course.
you're saying very clearly, so you're giving them the you're saying to them, you're just
You're
putting
giving
very
them the
clear boundaries in
solution.
place.
Could you just do this, please? And
Exactly. You're giving the solution. This is the way I'd like you to speak in front of them about this, or just don't speak at all about it. And, if you're going to speak negatively, I'm going to have to leave. But I want to be here, and I want to bring my child to see you.
it's not a
So
big ask just to use
not a
kind,
big ask.
caring
It's
language. No,
no, it's not. And I think that if they continue to use that language, I think that it's pretty disrespectful, really.
it's an active harm. Like they're actively
Yeah,
engaging in something that you've asked them not to. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Okay,
And so
and then I suppose my final question then for you is might be another. I feel like I'm finishing all the tricky questions, but this came in. So this tricky question then, and the reason I say it's tricky is because I suppose with the families that I support directly, that this is something that is unfortunately can be quite common. So say you've would say whatever the family relationship is, it would say we have two parents or two caregivers or whatever the scenario is. The child has been assessed, they've been identified as autistic. One parent, for whatever reason, they're like, okay, great, I really believe this, totally on board with this. But the other parent, they absolutely adore, love, care for their child, but they either don't see what everybody else is seeing or they can't accept it for whatever. No judgment
yeah,
here for me, but if that is
yeah,
quite a common scenario that would come across my own desk. So
yeah.
what do you have any advice? Say if I'm a parent, I've come through the assessment with Children's Clinic in Galway, you've given me all the support, you've done it, like
Mhm.
everything has been brilliant. But now I know, like maybe I haven't said it in front of the other parent, but I've said to you, look, Davida, I really am embracing this, but I just wonder X, Y, and Z. I think my partner is going to find this tricky. Is there anything that I can do to support them to see what we're seeing and what the report is saying or the identification
Yeah,
document
yeah.
is saying? Is there anything? Would that be something that comes across your desk
Yeah,
or
it
across the?
is, but we generally always have both parents in the process. Like we really strongly encourage. Now, obviously, there's some family situations where that isn't
Where it
possible,
doesn't,
but we
yeah.
we we really strongly encourage. And I think it's better if that is something that you are worried about. What I would recommend is actually instead of do bring them along to the assessment process. Even if you think they're going to be in there going, I think this is absolute rubbish, that's okay. We're totally used to that. Like it is literally our job to support, your child, support you
Everybody.
in this. So we're well used to that. That happens all the time that one parent isn't on board or doesn't think it. And usually, again, it's like we were saying this whole podcast, it's because it's out of fear. It can be out of they think
Mm.
that it's normal because they had it. And also I think for a lot of neurodivergent um parents, they have worked very, very hard their whole lives to mask, fit into society, fit into all these places. And so it is such a huge fear for them that we're saying their child is autistic and then this is okay way to be, they can be different, saying it to someone who has literally spent their whole lives consciously or unconsciously trying to be a part of the neurotypical. And I think that's it. I think it's really to come at it from a point of view of understanding that the outward might be not, anger or bluster or all of those kind of things, but like always underneath it is
The fear
fear
factor,
and
maybe.
sadness, and you have to meet people where they are. And the thing is, I mean, I don't want to generalize but it usually is the mother. Well, this is in heterosexual families, obviously, but like it usually is that if there's a mother and a father, that the mother is the one that's done so much research and looked into it and has talked to their friends and has done. And the thing is, sometimes again, this is a gross generalization because lots of times the dad has done loads of research as well. Okay,
Of course.
but But whoever hasn't done as much research, they're just not at that stage of the journey. Like you can't expect them to be at that stage of the journey. And I think sometimes there can be a frustration that they're not reading the information or they're not looking or they're not listening. But it's usually
Deep
out of
down, demand they accept where we are at, but then we forget we have to
fear.
accept where they're at. It's
We
like
have
it's
to
double
accept.
empathy again in a different way. We have to accept
Yeah.
each other's point of view and where we are on this journey together.
Yeah, exactly. And really, try as much as possible to kind of come at it like, look, we both really love this child. And, I want what's best for him or her. And so do you, and I understand that this is really difficult. And, I think coming at it with understanding rather than, now it's easy for me to say because I know that,
You're
in
like,
long-term
as it happens, I'm
relationships.
a chartered clinical psychologist and like have all this knowledge as well. Amazing.
Like no, no, no. But what I mean is, I'm saying this as in a professional capacity. But please don't think that all my interactions in my
Oh,
home life are these wonderful, like Snow White interactions. They're certainly not the one thing to know about psychologists is we're just in our own home lives. It's a whole different story than the
mm,
recommendations that we give. But yeah, I think it's just respecting people's journeys and maybe for the partner as well, finding resources that ties with them. So if they're a business person, you know, showing them the Richard Branson
yeah.
autobiography,
So
meeting
they can
them
see
where
they
they
can
are.
achieve. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I suppose I'm watching where we've definitely gone to the hour. So I'm going to give you one last kind of, I suppose, I don't want to say question, maybe I suppose if I was a parent now listening to the podcast, my child has been identified or diagnosed as autistic, and you want to say to them one message about what does this mean, or this is like an affirming kind of takeaway
Mhm.
from your child has been diagnosed as autistic.
Oh my goodness, one thing. I think
It
to
doesn't have to
take
be one;
away
it
from
can be
that
many.
is, well, I think that the huge takeaway from it is to really remember that your child was always autistic. So it's not like something, it's not like we've given you this thing. Your child was always autistic, and now you actually have a name for it and a reference point and have a community of people to listen to about this information, and that it is a hugely positive thing for your child. And not that being autistic does not come with challenges, of course it does, but your child was always autistic. Those challenges were always going to be there. But having identified this, you've actually done a really, really good job as a parent, because we see so many adults come into the autism and ADHD practice so much later, and the grief that they literally experience euphoria and relief and all these positive things, but a grief that they weren't identified earlier, because they all say that if I had been identified earlier, things would have been so much better because I would have understood myself. I would have known why I was different. So you have done your child, you have been a really good parent in bringing them through this process, because your child is now going to be able to understand themselves and understand the world around them. And it's going to make a massively positive impact for their mental health and for their future and for their ability to advocate for themselves going future in the workforce and school. So I would really kind of give yourself a pat on the back around that, and that this is the start of a really positive journey. And yeah, and I genuinely believe that. I'm not just saying that. It's a very positive journey where you're going to learn more about your child, learn more about yourself and the world around you. And I think it can be a massive change for families, a real turning point for families.
That's amazing. So listen, we leave it there. Thank you so much to Davida and for giving literally so much of your incredible busy time to myself this morning to talk about, I suppose, a childhood autism assessment or identification, depending on the language that you use. So again, thank you for listening. Thank you to the listeners. So thanks to Davida and thanks to the listeners. So
Uh,
I'll leave you go. Thank you so
Thanks so
much.
much, Amanda.